Alright, I've literally made this review 2 times now, rambled on too much, and just here we are again. So, third time's the charm, right? First off, sorry, times 10 to Freewell for taking so long with this review. No excuses, just my apologies. I know this is not a paid review and Freewell has no input into the content of this video whatsoever. They did send me a couple of these filters, but we'll talk about that in just a second. But we will just jump to the punchline right away. You should go out and get yourself some of these magnetic filters because they're incredible. But for those of you who want to see a little bit more, let's get into it. Hey, what's up? I'm Scott and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing for more no-nonsense tutorials and reviews. Alright, so of course you can check this out in the timeline below, but basically we're going to try and break this video into 3 parts. The first one, the good old what's in the box, plus of course talking about what are these and what's included, all that basic stuff. After that we'll talk about just how quick is this in reality to add or change filters. And finally, of course, we'll take a look at the optical quality, and spoiler alert, it's fantastic. So here I have 4 of their magnetic ND filters from their filter system. 2 of these were sent to me for the review and 2 more I've already bought in addition to those, and like I said, there's my true and honest assessment of how good these are. I have already bought myself more and I will be buying more again because there's a range of filters in their system, not only these ND filters. So that means circular polarizers, combination ND and polarizer filters, light pollution filters, glow mist filters, and even graduated ND filters. But do check the link in the video description for more detail. In any case, the ND filters which I have here cost $99 each for up to an 82mm filter size, which is coincidentally what I have, but they also have 95 and 112mm filters for $150 each. Their NDs start off at ND8, which I have somewhere in here, and I do also have their ND16, 32, and 64, and they do also have an ND1000 filter that I don't have here. Now, according to them, the filters use high definition premium optical glass, which is double side multi-coated for, they claim, 0 color shift. And I found that to be fairly accurate, but we will see that in just a minute. They're also double side coated to protect against water, dust, scratches, and oil, which is always a good thing to have in your filters to help keep them clean. So this is what you're going to get when you buy one of these. Obviously, they come with a hard plastic case, and the case is also, of course, magnetic. It would be pretty off-brand if they weren't. And the case itself is actually really quite nice compared to the plastic cases that you get with a lot of lens filters. However, I haven't been using these filter cases, and we'll talk about why in just a second. Inside the case, the 2 parts of the filter are initially connected when you buy this, the magnetic ring and the filter itself. Now this is probably kind of hard to see with this camera here, so I'll put some close-up B-roll over my voice here, but the first time, and the first time only, unless you put them back together for some reason, you will have to screw this into your lens's filter threads and then pull off the magnetic filter. It's nearly impossible to do that without screwing it on first because both parts are so thin. Coincidentally, that thinness is also the reason why it's a little bit tricky to pull apart 2 stacked magnetic filters or to hold on to one magnetic filter so it doesn't spin and screw off a standard filter that's attached to the front of one of these thin magnetic filters. Anyway, this is the magnetic ring itself here, and it does also have screw threads built in, so you won't have any problems using normal screw-on filters or most pinch-style lens caps, even with this semi-permanently attached to your lens. And it's the same story with the filter themselves. And I really applaud them for these little details because they made these filters and magnetic rings as thin as possible to avoid issues with vignetting as much as they could, while still keeping that flexibility to add screw-on filters or to add standard lens caps without needing to remove the base of this system. And since these are made for speed and convenience, that's really a necessary component in my opinion. Well done. Now, 2 little minor complaints here. One is that because this is so thin, although the magnetic ring itself is fairly grippy with the texture on the outside, if you screw this onto the front of your lens, there's a good chance that it's going to be very difficult to get it off just with your bare hands. And one of these silicone, whatever you would call it, things that you use to kind of get a grip on like the caps of jars is really helpful in getting this off of your lens if you want to do that. One more small complaint that may not be a complaint for everybody anyway is that although the texture on these magnetic rings is fairly grippy, the filters themselves, although they do have a little bit of a texture to them, is a little bit more smooth, and sometimes that can be difficult. Again, like I said, if you're trying to pull apart two stacked magnetic filters, it just makes it a little bit more tricky. Not a huge deal, small complaint, rare situation that becomes a problem, but it is something that I figured was worth mentioning. I should also say though that the lack of an extremely grippy texture on the filter itself probably does also help to avoid accidentally bumping it off when it's on the front of your lens. So it's that kind of give and take, I guess. Oh, and yes, as you may have guessed, these filters are totally stackable. If you're curious, a good old 50mm focal length, you could get up to about 2 or 3 filters before vignetting really became too major of a problem. On top of all of the basics, the lens, the magnetic ring, the case, you also get this metal, ultra thin magnetic lens cap with each filter that you buy. You can see it right here. Really, really thin profile. And remember that you're not stuck with using these. Pinch lens caps still generally do seem to work fine, but just like with the filters, these magnetic lens caps are so fast and easy. Again though, a quick kind of downside to the upside, if you don't have a lens hood on, just like I don't right here, and you put this in the bag just like this with the magnetic cap on, it will fall off or get pulled off pretty much 100% of the time. So if you do use these, I recommend keeping the lens hood on so that way the edges of this magnetic metal cap don't come in contact anything and get pulled off just like that. If you do have a lens hood on to protect that though, just shaking the lens around or having it bounce around a little bit in your bag as you walk should not cause any problems though. Both the lens filters and the caps are both on there pretty securely as long as you don't bump them from the edge. There are a couple more nice small touches in the box as well, like a lens cloth, of course, some stickers, and even some of these cards right here, which are paper-saving tutorials. They have these codes on the back you can scan if you want to look at video tutorials or instructions on how to install these filters. So now that we've got all that out of the way, why would you choose these over normal filters? There's way less frustration. They're way faster and way easier. There are fewer accidental drops or fingerprints getting on the lens from mishandling, and you just look way cooler using these, so, you know. But really, screwing on a filter sounds like a dumb thing to complain about, but especially when you're in a rush, it can be awkward and frustrating trying to screw one on in the field, and when you go to take it off, you have to do that kind of awkward dance of trying to guess when it's going to be the last turn before it comes off so you don't drop it. The best implementation I've seen so far is the Polar Pro variable ND filters that have a kind of hard round lens cap that pushes over the filter and helps you to grab it, to screw it on or take it off a little bit more confidently and without risking fingerprints as you handle it. But it's still 3 times slower than these are. So vis-a-vis the cases, to avoid needing to carry and handle multiple hard filter cases as I switch things up, I got this little filter case from Mindshift Gear. So I have all of them, except for one right now, right in one place. And let's just take a quick look using this, how long it takes me to take out, put on, and remove all 4 of these filters compared to screwing on and removing just one standard filter. Alright, cool? You convinced yet? I managed about 3 magnetic filters in the time that it took for just one screw-on filter. And this is really not how smoothly screwing on a filter usually works in the field, so this is really sort of a best case scenario. Anyway, let's take a look at optical quality and how these filters affect your image. First up, a boring one, sharpness. And I say boring because the effect is minimal. I cannot see any difference whatsoever in sharpness with any of these filters at 24mm. Just take a look at this darker piece of grass or whatever it is in the center of the frame here, exactly as crisp and clear in every photo. At 135mm, there is a very slight drop in sharpness as you go up towards the stronger ND filters, but it's virtually unnoticeable except when pixel peeping. And keep in mind, this is on a 61 megapixel camera. If we're looking at 50% magnification, which is about the max of what most cameras can resolve anyway, there's virtually no drop in sharpness. And for vignette, it's more of the same for the most part, almost no problem at all. At wider angles like 24mm, you might see a very slight amount of shading come into the corner with a single filter, and of course progressively more when stacking them. 2 filters I think still being usable, but 3 is over the limit. With a longer lens like 135mm for example, I can't even see any change in vignette even with 4 stacked filters. Of course, I'm not going to test every single focal length in between, but with a good old 50mm lens, I'd say that 2 filters are fairly clean, and with a third, it's still usable. Now, I tried and failed to find any effect on flare. I didn't see any additional chromatic aberration or anything like that either. And finally, color. Generally, these are pretty neutral. I found the maximum color difference within the range was just over 200K, ND16 and 32 having the most significant gap between them. ND32 was about 150K higher than the lens without any filter, meaning it had the largest shift away from standard, and ND16 was around 75K in the other direction. Otherwise, there was less than 40K difference between them, so I'd say that these effectively have close to zero effect on the color for the most part. And so that's about it. I hope I rambled less than the first 2 times. And I'd obviously highly recommend these. Like I said, I bought more myself, and I will probably try out some of their other choices like glow mist and maybe a CPL lens. Variable ND filters, we mentioned the Polar Pro, are very convenient once they're attached, and the high-end ones like that won't do much damage to your image quality, but there are often still issues with stronger color shift, weird patterns if you go too strong with it, and weirdness with things like phone screens. I've honestly found myself using these solid ND filters a lot more often than variable ND filters since I got them, just because they're so much faster and, I don't know, just kind of carefree. I know that my color should stay pretty much the same as I add or remove them. I don't have to think about upper limits and strength causing weird patterns in my images or screens going weird. Plus, it really is just so quick and easy, especially when you completely remove it. A variable ND filter is quick to adjust, but if you need to completely remove it, that convenience goes out the window. So if a system like this appeals to you, I can say that Freewell really got everything right. The glass is great quality, the system is thin, unobtrusive, and still lets you use the lens as you always would with lens caps and screw-on filters. And remember to check out their website with the link in the video description because they do have a much wider range than what I have here. But for now, if you have any questions or comments, do let me know down below and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. Otherwise, if you liked this video or found it helpful, please do consider to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, share, all that good stuff, and I'll see you next time.